Hello and good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, which is the BSI live webinar for transitions to ISO 9001-2015 and ISO 14001-2015 for the 2nd of October 2017. My name is Robert Lee and I'm BSI's UK Media Production Manager. With me today is Gordon Lawson, who is BSI's Management Systems Tutor for ISO 9001-2015 and ISO 14001-2015. Gordon has worked in the field of management systems for over 20 years, implementing and managing quality management, environmental, and health and safety management systems in a variety of industries, including polymer processing, automotive, aerospace in the UK, Europe, and in the USA. Among other things, he has been a British Accredited Bureau accredited freelance consultant as well. Gordon is well-traveled, and he has assured me he's also a distant relative to the inventor of the light bulb, Joseph Swan, not the lesser-known Thomas Edison. So let's hope he can give you some light bulb moments of your own today.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Rob, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this transition seminar, this webinar. As Rob said, my name's Gordon Lawson. Today, we're going to talk about the focus on leadership, the role of top management. We'll set off today by talking a little bit about that. We'll talk about the high-level structure, otherwise known as Annex SL, the template on which all management system standards are going to be based on. We'll take an overview of the main changes to the two standards, to both 9001 and 14001, and also other upcoming standards that are coming along, which will be adopting the high-level structure. I will indicate to you how you can access information on other, some of our client success stories, and finally talk about the transitioning process to the 2015 standards. Okay, so let's start off by talking about leadership. When we come to look later at the high-level structure, we'll see that there is a section all about leadership. That is section or clause 5 of both standards, and this really puts increased emphasis on your top management proactively playing their part within your management system. So before we go any further, let's just confirm what we mean by leadership and what we mean by top management. So what do we mean by leadership? Well, here we have a definition of what leadership's about. So this says leaders at all levels establish unity of purpose and direction and create conditions in which people are engaged in achieving the organization's quality objectives. And what do we mean by top management? The definition of top management is person or group of people who directs and controls an organization at the highest level. And by the way, these definitions are out of ISO 9000-2015. That is the standard which provides fundamentals and vocabulary. Basically, it includes a dictionary for the terms used in ISO 9001. Okay, so top management is the person or group of people who direct and control an organization at the highest level. So they would have the power to delegate authority and provide resources within the organization. Now, in a large organization, if your scope of your management system doesn't cover the entire organization, then top management would refer to those people who direct and control that part of the organization. That can often be the case in a very large organization. The scope may not cover the entire organization. Okay, so let's just think about the processes that top management are normally involved in a typical organization. They're normally directly involved in identifying the context of the organization. So that is about really understanding it within an organization, who what your issues are, both internal and external, who your interested parties are and what their expectations are. They would also be involved in identifying risks and opportunities within an organization. That would be typically business risks and opportunities within the organization. From this information, that would help them to set the policy and direction of the organization. In terms of both 9 and 14,001, when we talk about policy, we're talking about a statement of intent, typically a half-page or one-page statement of intent. And that would really be the top-level document within our management system. They would also be involved directly in planning risk management. So once they've identified the risks and opportunities, they would be involved in planning risk management and objectives. So obviously, if we discover that there is an unacceptable risk, they would set an objective which would be revolving around reducing that risk. On the other hand, if they identify an opportunity, they may well set an objective to take advantage of that opportunity. So those three things they would be directly involved with. They would also be responsible for providing support and determining roles and responsibilities. So in terms of support, we'd be looking at things like infrastructure. In terms of roles and responsibilities, those could be expressed in organization charts, job descriptions, and so on. In terms of indirect involvement, normally the top management would be indirectly involved in the operation of the organization. This would be the product or service that the organization is delivering to their customers. Normally they wouldn't be directly involved in that. They would be indirectly involved in that. However, they would be directly involved in reviewing the performance of the organization. And of course, that is carried out at management review. So that sort of indicates the areas that the top management are directly and indirectly involved in. And of course, one of the principles on which both standards are based and have been for some years is that principle of improvement. So management review is a bit like looking in the rear view mirror to look at how you've recently performed, and then looking forward as to what can be improved in the future. And of course, by going around that plan, do, check, act loop, organizations hopefully can achieve continual improvement. Okay, so in terms of exactly how top management demonstrate leadership commitment, if you actually look at the 2015 version of ISO 9001, there is a section that basically has a list within it, and that is clause 5.1. And by the way, if you look at 9001, the equivalent clause is also 5.1. So there are a number of ways in which top management need to demonstrate leadership. And yeah, as I say, these are listed in section 5.1 of both standards. So in terms of 9001, the first one is about accountability, that top management shall take accountability for the effectiveness of the quality management system. The second one is about ensuring that the quality policy and objectives are established and are compatible with the context and strategic direction of the organization. In other words, the quality policy and objectives need to be aligned with the business strategy. That's really what that is saying. The second point really is about it takes us the last point a bit further, ensuring the integration of the management system requirements into the organization's business processes. So I think you can see from the new 2015 standard, there's much more emphasis on the management system being part of how the organization is run, rather than something separate that gets a certificate on the wall. That's really what it's about. The next point is about promoting awareness of the process approach and also risk-based thinking. Processes have risks associated with them, and so we also need to think about the risks associated with those processes. E, as it is of 5.1, is ensuring that resources needed for the quality management system are available. So, one of top management's responsibilities to provide the necessary resources. The next point is communicating the importance of effective quality management and conforming to the quality management system requirements. So you'd expect top management to be actively involved in communicating the importance of your management system. The next point is ensuring that the management system achieves its intended results. So that again indicates a more proactive form of leadership from the top management in relation to the quality management system. The next point is engaging, directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the quality management system. Again, this is about sort of active leadership, promoting improvement, which is exactly what it says it is. And finally, the final point is supporting other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their areas of responsibility. So I think from that list, you can see that the new standard really expects a much more proactive form of leadership from the top management than the previous standard. Okay, I'll hand over to Rob, who's going to invite you to take part in a second poll.
Thanks a lot, Gordon. Okay, so our next poll is all about top management. So this is about, it's a statement. So top management actively demonstrate leadership and commitment with regard to the quality and environmental management system that you have. So do select whether it applies to you, whether you strongly agree, whether you agree, whether you neither agree nor disagree, whether you disagree, or whether you strongly disagree. So the results of the poll are: those of you who said top management actively demonstrate leadership and commitment with regard to the quality and environmental management systems that you have, 40% of you strongly agreed, which is great. 40% of you also agreed. 20% of you neither agreed nor disagreed. And thankfully, none of you disagreed nor strongly disagreed. So those are some very interesting results, I think you would say, wouldn't you, Gordon? Yes, that's right.
Generally, that's a good sign. Certainly, it looks like 40% of the top management are proactively involved already, which probably means they're playing their part already. Maybe 40%, maybe it's more than that if you add the agrees. 20% are perhaps not sure how involved their top management are, and perhaps they need to be, the top management need to be made a bit more aware of their responsibilities, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about Annex, SL, and integrated management systems. Historically, management systems, and by the way, both BSI and ISO, we don't actually write standards. if a standard needs to be developed, what we would do is invite a group of interested parties to form a committee to agree a form of words that should be within that standard. And when it comes to management system standards committees, historically, each management system standard has been written by a separate committee, and each committee has tended to work in isolation. As a result of that, many of the management system standards, the structure of those management system standards has varied from one management system standard to another. So a few years ago, ISO, the International Standards Organization in Geneva, decided in effect to write a standard for writing a management system standard. And what they developed was basically a template that contained the minimum clauses that a management system standard should contain. And and the thinking was that with all future management system standards that are either developed or updated, they should adopt that template. And the template was known as, or is known as, Annex SL, or the high-level structure. And once all of the management system standards adopt that template, it will mean that the clauses of all management system standards will be closely aligned. And the benefit of that will be that many organizations adopt more than one management system standard, and it should make the job of either aligning or integrating your management systems much easier. And of course, there is a subtle difference between alignment and integration. Many organizations choose not to have a fully integrated management system for various reasons. It may be for organizational reasons. But yes, certainly many organizations adopt several management system standards. So integrating is really having one management system that covers a range of disciplines, whereas alignment could be a case of keeping the management systems perhaps in many ways separate, but maybe just integrating some of the areas. And of course, it's your choice as to how far you want to take that. If you, for example, looked at environment, quality, health and safety, or other management system standards, there could be areas where it would be silly not to integrate things. So perhaps in terms of management review, document control, perhaps audits, those may be, an organization may well wish to integrate those activities, but then keep other areas of their management systems separate. At the end of the day, it's whatever suits an organization. Okay, I'll hand over to Rob for poll 3.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gordon. So your next poll is about the intention. So we intend to adopt or have adopted a fully integrated approach to management systems implementation. So do select one which applies whether you strongly agree, whether you agree, whether you neither agree nor disagree, whether you disagree or strongly disagree. So we have some very interesting results here. Those of you who said that you strongly agreed, that's 20%. Those of you who said you agreed, that's 60%. And those of you who said you neither agree nor disagree, it's 20% as well. For those of you who disagree or strongly disagree, there's no results for that. So I'm going to close that poll and back over to you then, Gordon.
Okay, thank you, Rob. At the end of the day, it's your choice as to what is appropriate in terms of level integration for your organisation, and that very often that can relate to the organisational structure, the structure of your organisation. Okay, so let me introduce to you the high-level structure. This is in effect a template that lays down the minimum clauses that are to be contained within a management system standard. The template actually contains 10 sections or primary clauses. You'll see on the screen here the first 3 are missing, and the reason for that is because the first 3 do not actually contain requirements. So section 1 is called scope. So within section 1, the scope of the management system is described. In other words, what the management system is designed to do for an organization that adopts it. Section 2 is called normative references. Section 2 really cross-refers to any other directly related management system standards. So in ISO 9001-2015, for example, Section 2 cross-refers to ISO 9000, which is fundamentals and vocabulary. Section 3 is called terms and definitions. So if there are any terms or definitions in this section, in the case of 9001, all it does is cross-refer you to ISO 9000. In 14001, it is a useful section. It is basically a dictionary for 14001. So if you read 14001 and you're not sure about a term, do have a look in section 3. That term may well be defined in section 3. Sections 4 to 10 described on this slide, illustrated on this slide, are the sections that contain the requirements. So within section 4, we have, section 4 is context of the organization. If you look within this section, there are 4 clauses. The first 2 are new clauses. So section 4.1 is called understanding the context of the organization. So this is about determining both external and internal issues that are relevant to the organization's purpose and its strategic direction. 4.2 is about interested parties. So 4.2 is about understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties that are relevant to the management system and understanding their requirements. So this would be not just thinking about customers in relation to 9001. It would also be thinking about obviously suppliers, investors, neighbors, regulators, and so on, and identifying what their requirements are. 4.3 and 4.4 are not really new. They're carried over from the old standard. So 4.3 is about determining the scope of your management system, and 4.4 is really just an introduction to the rest of the requirements. Section 5 we've discussed already. So this is the section around leadership. And 5.1 is the area that really lists those ways in which top management need to demonstrate leadership and commitment, which we've talked about previously. 5.2 gives the detail of the policy. So 5.2 of both standards, both 9 and 14, lay down the requirements for the policy. And then 5.3 is roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So 5.3 gives the detail in relation to roles, responsibilities, and authorities, the detailed requirements. Section 6 is planning. And the key new clause in section 6 is 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. In relation to the high level structure, the term risk doesn't just focus on negative risks, it also focuses on positive risks or opportunities. This clause really replaces what the old standards used to call preventive action. So preventive action was about identifying potential non-conformities and identifying action to prevent them occurring in the first place. Well, really, 6.1 takes on board that, but also takes on board positive risks as well, the opportunities that we might be able to take advantage of. 6.2, objectives and planning to achieve them. In essence, that is not a new clause. Management system standards have required improvement objectives and programs, as they used to be called, to achieve those objectives to be set. Section 7, if you look at the contents of section 7 or clause 7, you'll see again that those aren't entirely new. So 7.1 is around resources, identifying and providing the necessary resources. So resources would include human resources or people, also having the right infrastructure, which would include buildings, plant and equipment, IT systems. And the third type of resource would be about having the right work environment for people to work effectively. 7.2 and 7.3, competence and awareness. Again, the previous standards have talked about competence awareness. And 7.4 is about communication, both internal and external. And then finally, 7.5 is documented information. So section 7.5 talks about the documentation requirements of the standards, the management system standards. And it's quite simple now. The standards basically say wherever a clause says you've got to document something, you've got to document it. And then you've got to determine above and beyond the minimum requirements what else needs to be documented. Section 7.5 also covers what we used to call document control. Section 8 is operation. Now, in the high-level structure, operation contains just one clause, which is 8.1, operational planning and control. If you look, when we come to look at 14,001, you'll see one additional clause has been added, which covers emergency preparedness and response. If you look at 9001 2015, however, section 8 has basically also contains what was contained in section 7 of the old standard, which was product realization. So in fact, if you look at 9001 2015, section 8 is the largest part of the standard because it contains what was in section 7 of the previous standard. Section 9 is performance and evaluation. That contains three primary clauses. 9.1, monitoring, measurement, analysis and evaluation. So that clause requires you to identify what needs to be monitored and measured, how you're going to do it, and also how you're going to analyze and evaluate that information. 9.2 is the clause that lays down the requirements for carrying out internal audits. And 9.3 is the clause that requires management reviews to be carried out by top management. And finally, the final section is section 10, which is simply called improvement. Now, although that is a new clause or a new section within the standards, if you look at the contents, they're not new. 10.1 is around non-conformity and corrective action, and 10.2 is quite a short clause which simply says that continual improvement needs to be a permanent objective of your management system and of your organization. So nothing new there, but there is a self-contained section now called improvements. Okay, now at first sight, it may be difficult to see how the new high-level structure template relates to continual improvement through plan, do, check, act. And what this slide illustrates is really how the high-level structure does indeed correlate to that plan, do, check, act model. So if you looked obviously at sections 5 and 6, they really relate to the plan part of your management system. Certainly section 6 is called planning. Section 7 and 8 really relate to do. Support and operation. Support and operation are the do parts of the management systems. Section 9 is performance evaluation. So that's certainly the check part of the standards. And section 10, improvement, that does relate to act. And then finally, context of the organization. Well, that really sort of sets the scene for your management system standard. Okay, so the both 9001 and 14001 2015 were published in September of 2015, and they adopt the 10 section high level structure. We'll start by taking a look at some of the key changes to ISO 9001. So many of the changes do come from the high level structure. The standard does adopt a process approach. Nothing new there really. 9001 has been focused on the process approach probably for about the last 17 years. So that's certainly not new, but there's more emphasis on the process approach now and the risks that can be associated with your processes. In terms of documented information, 9001-2015 no longer requires you to have a quality manual, nor does it require what it calls documented procedures, what used to be called documented procedures. So those are no longer prescribed within the new standard. The standard does emphasize relationship management. That really comes from the high level structure. So you need to identify who your interested parties are, not just your customers and the suppliers, but other interested parties. You need to identify what their needs and expectations are, and then which of those you need to ensure that you're complying with. So that really relates to 4.1 and 4.2 of the new standard. Again, leadership appears in section 5 of 9001-2015. We've already talked quite a lot about that. That's certainly emphasized. There is a lot of emphasis not just on making sure people are competent and aware of the part they play within the management system, but one subtle change of ISO 9001 is that we now need to think about competence on a holistic level rather than an individual level. So a new clause has been added, which isn't actually from the high level structure. It's been added in addition to the high level structure, and this is clause 7.16 organizational knowledge. And just to quote to you what 7.16 says, it says that you need to determine the knowledge necessary for the operation of your processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. And what do we mean by organizational knowledge? Well, this is knowledge specific to your organization. It's generally gained by experience. It's information that is used and shared to achieve your organization's objectives. So you'll probably find within your organization there is some knowledge that is specific to your organization, and if all the people that had that knowledge were to suddenly not be around, that would have a severe impact on your organization. So that's what we mean by organizational knowledge. Now, if you've got a good HR department, then possibly they already look after that organizational knowledge. But many organizations go through, perhaps sometimes rapid changes, and perhaps people with key information do leave the organization, and sometimes that has a significant impact on that organization. That's the type of knowledge we would regard as organizational knowledge. So that's certainly a new emphasis within the new standard. There is emphasis on the risk-based approach. So as we've said previously, we're not just thinking about negative risks, we're also thinking about positive risks or opportunities as well. And what we should be doing, obviously, is if we discover a risk that is not acceptable in terms of a negative risk, we should be coming up with some objectives or some actions to reduce that risk. On the other hand, if we identify some opportunities or positive risks, we should be coming up with some objectives to actually take advantage of them. Okay, I'll hand over to Rob now, who's going to conduct poll 5.
Thanks, Gordon. Okay, so now we have your next poll, which is: we have adopted a risk-based approach within our quality management system. So do select one. Do tell us if you strongly agree, whether you agree, whether you neither agree nor disagree, whether you disagree or strongly disagree. Okay, we have some evenly spaced results. For those of you who strongly agree, that's 25%. For those of you who agree, that's 25%. And for those of you who neither agree nor disagree, that's 50%. So I'm now going to pass you back over to Gordon.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Yeah, that's an area that many organisations will that are transitioning to the 2015 standard will need to take a close look at in terms of risks and opportunities. That's certainly an area that will need to be looked at. Okay, let's just talk about the 2015 version of 14001 now. Again, of course, it adopts that high-level structure. And of course, many of the changes do come from that high-level structure. But one key change that has been added to the standard that doesn't come from the high-level structure is emphasis on the life cycle approach. If you look at the 2015 version of 14001, you'll see many clauses refer to the life cycle approach. Under the new standard, it is mandatory to consider the life cycle. And before we go any further, what I ought to do is just make sure that everybody understands what we mean by the term life cycle. That term is actually defined in section 3 of the new standard. And the definition of life cycle is consecutive and interlinked stages of a product from raw material acquisition or generation from natural resources to final disposal. So typically the stages could include acquisition of raw materials, design, production, transportation, delivery, use, end of life treatment, and final disposal. Now, In many industry sectors, there are legal obligations to consider and implement the life cycle approach. In the automotive and electronics industry, for example, there is legislation. In other areas, there isn't any legal obligation, and with the new standard, there is an obligation to consider the life cycle approach. That doesn't necessarily mean you've got to adopt it, and certainly at all stages, but you certainly need to consider it. So that element has been incorporated into the life cycle approach has been incorporated into the new 2015 version of 14001. If you look at the other areas on this slide, you'll see that the other areas have really come from the high-level structure rather than separate requirements. So in terms of interested parties, obviously that features in section 4 of the high-level structure. That is a new requirement to identify your interested parties and their expectations. However, if you looked at the old standard, the 2004 version of 14001, if you looked at the back of that standard, it did suggest or strongly recommend that when you're establishing your management system, you should carry out an initial environmental review. And typically, as part of that initial environmental review, you would probably consider your interested parties and what their expectations were. So for many organizations, they probably have already considered this within their environmental management system, but now it's a formal requirement to actually do that. Okay, I will hand over to Rob for poll 5. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Gordon. Okay, so your next poll is about life cycle. So we have taken a life cycle perspective when considering our environmental aspects. So do tell us if this takes place in your business, whether you strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, whether you disagree or strongly disagree. We have two options here: strongly agree, 33%, and those of you who neither agree nor disagree, 67%. We'll close that poll and pass you back over to Gordon now.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's worth bearing in mind that it's not mandatory that you adopt the life cycle, but it is mandatory that you consider it. So, yeah, that is something that may be more relevant to some organisations than others, and obviously that's an area to look at. Okay, so let's just consider how you will address the new requirements, how you'll implement them, and consider, is the process achieving what you want it to? Whenever BSI judge a management system, whenever we carry out an audit of a client, we actually judge their management system on 3 levels: intent, implementation, and effectiveness. And these are the levels on this slide here. So the intent is, does your management system say the right things? Does it address the requirements? Does it say what the requirements require it to say? So that's the first level that we need to consider when we're adopting these new requirements. The next level is, okay, we've identified how we address these requirements. The next step is to actually implement those changes to actually meet those requirements. So we need to consider how those requirements are rolled out across our organization, how those changes are rolled out across our organization. And then the third consideration is, okay, we're now saying the right things, we're doing what we're saying, but is our management system effective? Is it achieving what we want it to do for us? And obviously a basic minimum requirement of any management system standard is that we're aware of our legal obligations or our compliance obligations, and we're able to demonstrate that we're meeting those obligations. And then on the next level, perhaps, okay, as we're meeting our legal obligations, but what we ought to also be doing is looking at how we can go above and beyond purely legal compliance through continual improvement. So, is our management system ensuring that we're able to demonstrate that we're achieving continual improvement? Those are two good measures of whether or not our management systems are achieving what we want them to do. Okay, so in terms of support from BSI, obviously we can provide support, and that can range from training, gap analysis, and so on. There is a range of support we can offer. I think this is a point at which I'm perhaps handing over to Rob on this. Is that correct, Rob?
Yes, there's lots and lots of different support that you can get from BSI. I mean, obviously, we have many things from training to apps to gap assessment and other aspects as well. I would suggest that if you are searching for support from BSI, that you contact us directly to tell us the specifics of your situation, and our customer services will be able to help you out to define exactly what it is would be most suitable for you in terms of support from us.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Thank you. If you're looking at some success stories from organizations implementing management systems that meet the new standards and making the transition, there are some case studies available on the website on this slide, so that could be useful to find out perhaps similar organizations to your own, their story about how they went about making the transition to the new standards, and what benefits it provided for them. That might be something to have a look at. Okay, now, as I think I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the high-level structure is going to be adopted by all the management system standards as and when they are updated. And by the way, it's worth bearing in mind that a management system standard is not written in, none of them are actually written in tablets of stone. 5 years from the point at which they are published, the committee gets together, reviews how well that management system standard is operating, and starts to review what improvements can be made to it. That doesn't mean they're republished every 5 years. What it means is that the committee gets together and starts to consider what improvements can be made. And so as all of the management system standards are updated, they will be adopting the high-level structure, that 10-section high-level structure. And this slide illustrates some of the time scales, some of the timelines that are predicted for some of the management system standards. Now, these are only predicted timescales, and in fact, just looking at this, I can see that ISO 45001 on this slide illustrates that it will appear sometime this year. In fact, it now will be most likely to appear next year. So these, because sometimes these standards require more consultation and more development than was anticipated, but certainly this slide will give you some indication of some of the timescales for some of the management system standards. And the whole idea is that once they've all adopted the high-level structure, that should make it much easier to develop an integrated or aligned management system that would meet a number of management system standards requirements. Okay, so in terms of your transition journey, do visit our website. We have a dedicated website relating to the revisions. Do get hold of a copy of the standard and read it. And don't just read the requirements. You'll find that if you get hold of a copy of the standard, there is some very good guidance at the back of both 9001 and 14001 2015. So don't just read the requirements sections, do look at the guidance at the back. Make sure you understand the changes. And if you are with BSI, certified with BSI, certainly do book a gap analysis audit. That will assist you in identifying gaps that you may or may not be aware of. Obviously, once you've identified your gaps, you need to come up with an implementation plan as to how you're going to address those gaps, and then you need to implement those changes to fill those gaps. And then, of course, make the transition to the new standard. In terms of the transition process, it is worth bearing in mind that there is a transition window, and in fact, we are roughly 2/3 of the way through the transition window. Most standards were published in September 2015, and a 3-year transition window was set. That means that by September of next year, of 2018, the 2004 version of 14001 and the 2008 version of 9001 will be withdrawn. So if an organization hasn't successfully transitioned to the new standards by September of next year, that would actually mean they would actually lose third-party certification to the standard. So it's essential that that transition is completed by September of next year. Okay, so the tip is, if you haven't done it already, do start your preparation now. You've got less than 12 months to move to the new standards. There are a comprehensive suite of support materials and services to support you from BSI. So do take advantage of what's available to you. Do have a look at our revisions website. Yes, do start your training as soon as possible. That will help to embed knowledge within your organization. You'll see that one of the things listed on this this page is senior management briefing. So if you need any assistance in making senior management aware of the part they need to play within the new standards, we do offer a senior management briefing session. That's typically a session lasting 2 or 3 hours, focused on your senior management to make them aware of their responsibilities under section 5 of the new standards. So that is something that many organizations have taken advantage of, have opted to go for. It means that they would actually get an independent account of their responsibilities in relation to the new standard. Okay, so that certainly we have other products and other training that we can provide. Okay, so the thing is, if you haven't started already, do start straight away with your transition preparation. Do download our implementation toolkit, and do keep talking to your BSI contact if you're a client of BSI's. Do keep talking to us, and making sure you're on track with the transition. Okay, so just to talk about some of the additional services that can be offered to support you. We do offer a gap assessment service, which I think I talked about a few minutes ago. And we also offer business improvement software to help you plan your revision against the new framework. So do have a look at what we can do to help you. Okay, this just illustrates that there is a deadline, which is September of 2018. So do make sure you keep on track. Don't leave it all until the sort of middle of next year to start getting around to address the changes. You may discover that you run out of time if you do that. Okay, I'll hand over to Rob, who will conduct poll 6.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gordon. So now we're going to run your next poll, which is about the plan and timescale for transition for you. So do let us know if you've developed a plan and a timescale for transition to the new standards. ISO 9001 2015 and ISO 14001 2015. Tell us if you are in agreement with this, whether you strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, whether you disagree or strongly disagree. Right, we have an even split here, so we have 33% across the board for those who strongly agreed, those who agreed, and those who are on the fence. Back over to you, Gordon.
Okay, well, that's obviously fairly positive news for those that strongly agree. The ones that are on the fence, obviously, it's a case of getting things moving and making sure you don't miss that deadline of September of next year. So there's obviously some time left, but it's now less than 12 months. Okay, so just to summarize what we've talked about over the last hour, one tip is to start your transition journey as soon as possible, obviously. BSI, we can actually help and support you along this journey. We obviously want our clients to transition successfully by the deadline, so we're working hard with support to help our clients make the transition as smoothly as possible. And yes, do speak to your client manager, and if it hasn't happened already, please do book your readiness review now. And yes, do visit our website for information on the revisions.
Right. So with our Q&A section, we've had a few questions which have come in, and one of those is we've had the question which has come in, and it's about leadership. I'll say it exactly how it is. Leadership: should senior management not already know that they need to do this? Gordon, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, yes, I think that's an interesting question. I suppose the answer is yes, they should. But I think sometimes senior management historically have seen the quality or environmental management system as something separate to the way that the organization was run. And I think it's a case of really making it understood with the leadership that your 9001 compliant quality management system or 14001 compliant environmental management system should be part of how the business is run, and that in order to, as part of that, the message needs to come from the top, really, to get everybody on board with the requirements of the management system. So yes, the answer is yes. Obviously, they should know, but I think the problem isn't, in many organizations, isn't that top management or senior management aren't showing leadership, but that they're not perhaps seeing the management system as part of how they should be strategically and on a day-by-day basis running the business. And that's really what this is all about, to be honest. Yeah. Okay.
Right. We have another question here, which is, do you have any methods for identifying risks and opportunities?
Okay. Now, interestingly enough, although this clause is a new requirement in relation to the standards, it comes from the high-level structure. Most organizations will be doing this already. At the end of the day, these management system standards try to reflect best practice. Many large organizations already have what they would call a risk register. And they would create those for the benefit of their investors. Because if you're investing a lot of money in a business, you want to know really what risks you're taking on board with your investment. So many organizations will already have perhaps a risk register. Now, it might just focus on the negative risks rather than the opportunities, so it might need to be developed to reflect that. Many organizations have, again, a marketing department. Again, they very often will identify certainly some positive risks. So it's worth initially speaking to your colleagues who you may not regard as generally directly involved in your management system, and you may discover that a lot of this risks and opportunities have already been identified at a very senior level or through a marketing department. So, don't reinvent the wheel. At the end of the day, these management systems should be integrated within the way the business is run. So, if you've got colleagues who've already the starting point is to establish if colleagues have already identified risks and opportunities which have been obviously not integrated within your management system to this point. So that's a good way of doing it, to invite other people in different across the board to identify their risks and opportunities, which they may already have done. Okay.
Great. So the next question is, with the new management systems coming in place, should I now rip up my quality manual?
Well, I wouldn't do anything dramatic and drastic straight away, to be honest. Although the quality manual is no longer required by ISO 9000 or 2015, that doesn't mean it's prohibited either. The standard basically now says it's down to you to determine what you need above and beyond the requirements of the actual standard. If you actually look at 9001, 2015, 4.4 puts emphasis on the quality management system and its processes. Well, really, what a quality manual does, or has done historically, is described the quality management system processes. So it may be appropriate to retain or modify your existing quality manual rather than to actually rip it up and throw it away. I certainly wouldn't recommend you do that without very carefully considering perhaps the risks associated with it, to be honest. Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we have our last question which has come in, and that is about organizational knowledge. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? How do I identify it? How do we best use it?
Yes. I mean, many organizations, again, have already thought about this on a strategic level already. But historically, many organizations haven't. So organizational knowledge is really knowledge that is specific to your organization. If it's generic knowledge, it's not necessarily specific to your organization. So, for example, if you've got people servicing the canteen and running the canteen or looking after the grounds, that wouldn't be regarded as organizational knowledge. Organizational knowledge would be knowledge specific to your organization. And one way of identifying that is to apply the banana skin test. In other words, if certain key people were to slip on a banana skin and no longer to be around, would their knowledge, the knowledge they have, or the lack of it within the organisation, have a severe impact on the organisation? That's one way of identifying organisational knowledge. Organisational knowledge also links to succession planning. So if you've got people heading for perhaps retirement in the next few years with certain key knowledge, what you need to think about is how is that knowledge going to be retained, and that probably involves a certain amount of succession planning and preparation for those people leaving the business. The banana skin test is a good one. If those people to suddenly disappear, would that have an impact, a severe impact on our organisation? And if the answer is yes, then there's probably a strong indication that there is some organisational knowledge that they have that really needs to be safeguarded. Okay.
Okay, great. Right. So thank you all for attending today. I'd like to thank Gordon and, of course, you, the audience, for joining us today. We certainly hope you've enjoyed the webinar. So with that said, that's it. Thank you once again, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.